record to the cloud. And welcome everyone to the building, what's this called? Develop Successful Teams series from Toastmasters International. My name is Scott Brown. I am the PQD here in District 11. Tonight we're going to talk about area director, division director roles, how they roll up into the grand scheme of things, and how you can make an impact on clubs and members within not just your visits, but also within your presence. Sound good? For this one, there is a presentation, so I'm going to share my screen with the official Toastmasters presentation. Everyone can see area and division director training, develop successful teams. Yay. My microphone didn't cut out when I switched over tonight, hopefully. It did that last night. Very good. All right. What we're going to talk about tonight, who are your team members? We're going to touch a little bit on team agreements. And I know, Rick, you've done some good work with team agreements also, that I think I'm going to have you talk a little bit about the team agreements you've done, because from what I've heard from some of your area directors, they really enjoy the way that you formatted the year for them. Team motivation and then conflict resolution. So that's how we're going to cover this tonight, what we're going to talk about. We're going to start with recounting the roles of area and division directors, identifying members of area and division councils, and what a division council is and when they should meet and why they're actually a good idea. Describe a team charter and its benefits, building trust, applying the 5 principles of motivation, plus a couple that Toastmasters doesn't actually talk about, but I think are incredibly important, and how to use conflict resolution techniques. That is our map for tonight. We start with an area director. For everyone who is or has been an area director, what are the roles or role that you see an area director fulfilling within the grand scheme of things? What do you think area directors actually do? Please feel free to unmute yourself and chime in.
My biggest thing is that you're a connection between the individual clubs and, say, the trio, or at least higher up people, possibly, like the division director, or even the trio, or a member on the executive committee. And a lot of times you have a relationship with that person and would be able to go to them directly, where the person down in the club is just really not comfortable with it, or doesn't know the person, or they don't even know who to contact. But you're the one that was supposed to be able to be a contact between them and getting their answers, even if you don't know them.
Fantastic. Absolutely. That is very well said. Without a doubt, liaison is one of the massive parts of what area directors do, is one of the most important things they do. But there's some other stuff that area directors do as well. What else do area directors do? Besides the reports, what else do area directors actually do? Rick?
Well, I've been an area director a lot of times, and to tell you the truth, every time I do it, it's the most fun thing I have ever done insofar as Toastmasters roles are concerned. And for me, it's getting to know the people, being able to adjust what you can do for that club to what the club's needs are. And you can say about the mundane things we have to do is fill out all the forms and make sure they understand when the dates are for things, and understand what clubs have to do to become distinguished. But it's also meeting the challenge, working together with those officers and looking to see what they might do to be able to make themselves more successful. And a lot of times it is providing as a liaison, as Laura mentioned, because people have questions they don't have experience with. They have to know to come through you. And if I find something that I don't know the answers to, I go right away to someone in the top 3. So I get to know the people both above and the people, well, I wouldn't say above, but in the district level, and I get to know the people that are in the club. And that's the most fun part for me.
So what I'm hearing about is from both of you, it's so far you both talked about relationships, and it sounds like you're both talking about doing something different for every club, that there's no 2 clubs that need the exact same thing, and trying to personalize your approach to the clubs. Am I right in how I'm hearing that?
Yeah, can I add something to it?
Of course, Rahana, go for it.
I feel like when I was area director for Area 84, those clubs are quite vibrant. And until I went there, I didn't know what they're doing. So I didn't just go there to, fulfill the report or do a successful club, speech. I actually went there to see that what kind of help I can provide them and kind of build a bridge. And I would say that success was that from out of 5 clubs, 4 clubs were able to participate in district because I felt that they were not only expanding their horizon, but wanting to help the division and district training. And so that was quite an eye-opening for me, that, oh my goodness, I'm not just a liaison, but I actually learned a lot from them to better myself.
Absolutely. So it's a two-way experience, isn't it? That sometimes you learn more from your clubs than your clubs learn from you. Um, that's an incredibly strong lesson, Rohana. Thank you very much. There's one other thing that I think is really important for area directors to be able to do, and I haven't touched on it yet. Is there anything else out there that you think is important for area directors to be able to do?
Do the local, encourage them to do the contest and participate in contest?
Yep, that's part of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
There's one other big thing that I think is really important within the whole area director role. When you're an area director, how many clubs do you have?
4 or 5, 6.
Something like, yeah, 4, 5, 6, usually top 6, right? How many of those clubs know each other? If you're lucky, maybe a couple, right? The chance of all 6 clubs knowing each other pretty well is probably pretty minimal. So they probably don't know what each other does well and what they can learn from other clubs as well. I really see area directors as not just being a liaison to help them answer questions, but to help them share knowledge at their level, club to club, to get them in touch with other club presidents, other club VPEs, to create a network for them so that they can learn from each other and take the best of what each other does to help enhance their own club. You might have somebody that is 3 miles away from each other, has never been to that other club, and the thing that they need most is right there, and they have no idea that they're so close to it. The building a community and the relationships between the clubs. It's not just that working your way up to answer questions for them, but it's really that making sure that club 1 connects to club 2, connects to club 3, connects to club 4. And it's not just 6 individual clubs, but it is a community of clubs within a specific geographic area. And I think that's a really important part of what area directors do, because you get the fun part of being able to go visit all the clubs. That is, to me, that is one of the most fun things we can absolutely do within Toastmasters, is get to go to visit other clubs. So what do you think about that? Does that sound, do you agree with that or no?
Oh, fully. Yeah, I've heard many people say the best role to have is that of an area director. That's part of the reason why I haven't wanted to go much higher, because I'm enjoying being an area director.
I completely agree with you. I think it's a lot of fun. And like when I moved to Fort Wayne, I went and visited every club here, not as an area director, but just as a regular Toastmaster. I was a plain old Toastmaster. And just going to get to experience every club is so much fun, and you get to do that as an area director. I love that part. So yes, I think you touched on everything that Toastmasters says is important about being an area director as well. Toastmasters talks about providing support, maintaining regular contact with club, visiting clubs twice a year, helping clubs enhance and maintain the quality to reach goals outlined in club success plans, helping to achieve the area success plan, and reporting to the division director and district leaders about the area's progress towards their goals. I think the relationships that you talked about are far more important than the end results. If you master the activities, the results come. It's not about trying to manage towards distinguished goals. If you do the right things, those goals just naturally follow. They just naturally follow. We on board with what area directors do? We all good to move on? Thumbs up if we're good to go.
Yep.
Sweet. All right. Area directors also have the opportunity to have a little bit of a team. And what Toastmasters suggests is to have an area secretary, which I have never seen anywhere. I'm not exactly sure what that person would do, but I do like at the bottom of this, assistant area director program quality, assistant area director club growth. Or what if we just had an assistant area director, period? I think that would be fantastic. The reason why I would love to see every area director have an assistant area director is for two things. One, it shares that experience with another individual to show them the benefits of stepping up into district leadership. And two, and I think this is probably a little bit more important, it makes your role as an area director a little less heavy. That, especially when it comes to doing contests, because we're doing contests online this year, it is a whole different thing. So to have somebody walking with you to help you through those processes, I think is invaluable to help do that. And as we get to division directors, we're going to talk about the exact same thing of having an assistant division director, of being able to walk you through that. Your assistant area director can be the person that steps into your shoes the next year. Every year that I have been a Toastmaster for 8 years, I have watched multiple districts struggle to find area directors and to figure out who is going to take over for individuals. I know, Rick, you and I both come from different districts. Is that your experience as well, that backfilling area division directors can sometimes be a little bit challenging for districts?
Well, yeah, I think it could be a little bit challenging, but you know, there's even a provision for some districts that they elect area directors because there is competition for it. And even in, I don't think I can even generalize the district. I think generally when I find you're in a heavier population area, I know from Minnesota rural, it was difficult. Within the city, you had multiple people often interested in being area directors. So I think every district has that problem someplace,
yeah,
and some don't.
And I think you're absolutely right, and I think that we're representative of that issue as well. Some of the more rural places, like Fort Wayne, is the second biggest city in Indiana, but it's not a big city, so we don't have a lot of clubs with a lot of members. We have clubs that are spread out. We go all the way to Kendallville, which is about round trip is about an hour. So we have that same challenge as some of the more rural areas, except for Indianapolis within our, and Louisville within our own district, we don't necessarily have larger metropolitan areas. If we can find a way, and I don't know the secret sauce for this in any way, but if we can find a way to encourage someone to walk with us within our areas so that next year we have a better pool to choose from, a pool that is already excited to do the role, I think it makes everybody's job a little bit easier going forward, not just for this year, but for future years as well, that it sets us up for future success. So if it's possible, I think assistance is absolutely the way to go. Rick, have you had an assistant before?
I got to get faster, but unmuting myself. I had the assistant I had last year is the Area 61 director this year.
Fantastic. Mark, have you had an assistant before? No? Laura?
I haven't had anybody assist me. I try to assist whoever is the division director as much as I can, but
yeah,
because I know with my experience, a lot of times I'm more familiar with what's going on at some of these than they are, and I can give them a little bit of guidance that this is what I've experienced, or this is something you may want to look into.
Absolutely.
Laura just gave me some clue to counter in.
Congratulations, Laura. You have a new job.
You have been nominated, Laura.
Yes.
No, thank you.
And Mark, what about you?
I have not been an area director, so no, I've not had an assistant area director.
Okay. How are you? So as a division director, have you had an assistant within that role or no?
Not formally.
Okay.
Last year, Dave Reddick, who was experienced and I was not, was a great help to me and performed many of those roles without the title and the high pay that goes with being an assistant.
Yeah. Especially the high pay.
The high pay is really a key within this. We'll talk about that, the compensation we get when we talk about motivation too. I was an assistant area director twice and an assistant division director once before I ever moved into roles, because they weren't official roles within 84 or 47, and I was able to still compete. So sometimes you can start to groom folks to move away from the competition side and into the leadership side by giving them exposure to this as well without disqualifying them from moving on to do something else. So I definitely am a fan of the whole assistant part, and if we can do it, I think that makes everybody's jobs easier. This is a nice segue into division directors. So if you were to tell me kind of the same conversation we had about what does an area director do, what do you think a division director does? What are the things that a division director should be responsible for, and how do they impact the whole process? Feel free to unmute.
I guess I'll go ahead and start since everybody else is so shy. As Toastmasters, I know that's a real problem. Everybody is so shy. The thing I see as a division director is somewhat of a mentor to your area directors and a person who is another like liaison for you. It's so often I have an Army background. I was in for a number of years, and even within a lot of organizations, there's this thing about follow the chain of command. And it's better to go and check with your division director, if you're an area director, about a particular issue, rather than a lot of times going directly to the person in the top 3 or the executive person in charge of that particular area, because they may know and be able to give you far better guidance because they'll be able to do so within your particular area, or within like the division district. They'll know that within our division, it works better by doing this versus another division. They may want to do something totally different, but within their division, that works far better than it would for us. So I look at them as just being, like I say, the big liaison thing, and they're able to go and get people motivated. That's I see them as a big motivator of their area directors and even members in different clubs. Some division directors make it their goal that when they become one, they'll go and visit each one of the clubs within their division at least once. And that's fine and dandy, and that's a neat thing for the clubs and a neat thing for them too. So it just depends on kind of the person in charge, but there's still, everybody has kind of the same role, but they have a kind of a latitude to be able to do it in whatever way benefits them the best.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right that that mentor part, I think, is a huge portion of what division directors do to impact the whole process, without a doubt. Mark, Rick, Farhana, what do you have to say?
I'll jump in a little bit.
Cool.
Last year was my first year as division director. This is my second. What I learned most last year was some of what we've already heard. I got to meet an awful lot of people, which I really enjoyed, and I profited a great deal from meeting those people. And that's the same thing that happens with area directors, I believe, but it works very well. The biggest challenge I had last year was communication. In other words, how do I communicate with the different area directors? And that was difficult throughout the entire year because some responded to one method, some to another, and some very frequently not at all. So that left me wondering, am I going to do that job or is somebody else? And that was a challenge that I've not run into this year. I think because this year we had the ability to say, you know, I think I know who would make a good area director, instead of having one pushed off on us. Mind you,
there's absolutely something to that.
Yep. Last year, but it was a good thing to be able to choose our own, or have insight into that, input into that this year. The division director, to my mind's primary job, is to lessen the burden on the trio.
Okay.
I've got 23 clubs. Hopefully, between the area directors and I, we can limit the upflow of questions and information that you need to deal with outside of what else you need to deal with. Plus, hopefully you'll be able to communicate with the 8 of us instead of the 50 or whatever area directors and hundreds of clubs. So that's my 2 cents worth.
I echo it, Mark, completely. And Scott, when you mentioned that mentoring, and Laura also mentioned mentoring, sometimes I feel like moving a mountain is much easier than moving human mind. So I would have to say this year I've been lucky. This is my first time, but I'll be saying that I'm the most luckiest person in the earth during this time. Laura came in, Richard, who is experienced, came in, Trevor Black came in. I had Ahalia, who is phenomenal. She is taking 6 clubs. I have Corinne CC, she came in, and Trevor Black, like I mentioned. I had one other area director who happened to, I actually did my best with her in terms of communicating. But later I figured out that I'm a strong woman, I can take the hit. So I kind of frankly went down that hall and had this, heart-to-heart conversation saying, hey, if you are not up for the job, I can take it. So finally she came down and said, no, I'm not going to be able to do it. So, which is pretty good because, I have all those people who's supporting me, the experienced area director. And then I have 2 who's like, shooting rockets. I mean, I cannot catch up with them, so I'm blessed. I would say that one area director that I'm doing all those things myself kind of makes me feel good about it. On the other hand, I feel like that I could recruit someone. So this is still, way to work in progress, knowing there are some sort of shaky areas some club might not sustain. Given their circumstances. So yeah, I am working on that area by myself. But overall, I will say that mentoring is one thing, and then communication, and sometimes it over communication, I don't mind.
Wonderful. I think you guys are both very much, I think everybody so far has been right on track with this. That again, it's about the relationships, and it's about how you're able to pull the best out of the people that you have. How do you help play to their strengths the most? And how do you help them figure out where they're going to go with Toastmasters? How does this become beneficial for them? And Rick, I can see you started to talk and I talked over you. I'm sorry, so go for it.
No, just breathing heavy. The other thing that we haven't touched upon, I think, is that, at least from my perspective, you're teaching the directors by your example how to lead. And what them watching you is much more effective than them listening to you talk. So when we got together for the division plan, for example, we agreed upon what integrity was, what respect was, how we were going to go through conflict resolution. And they need to be able to see me play that out in how I deal with them and how I deal with other Toastmasters. And that, in my opinion, I'm generally grooming those area directors all to be division directors. But on the other hand, you also have to be sensitive to why each individual area director is there. In my experience, just in this year, I've got some that are there because they do want my job. I've got some that are there that aspire to leapfrog from area director to even higher in the district. Some who are in it only because, not only because it is going to help them get their DTM in the coming year. We can help everyone do that and at the same time be successful. So that kind of leadership by example, I think, perhaps crosses over into all of these things that I've mentioned so far, and is really what I keep myself focused on. If I take action X, how will that be viewed by the area directors, and how can they learn from that?
That is wonderful. I think you touched on something there that we don't talk nearly enough about, or we haven't talked about it historically. A lot of folks move into leadership positions like area directors because they're trying to gain some experience that they can apply outside of Toastmasters. And this is a wonderful place for someone to stretch beyond their comfort zone and figure out how to lead a group or a team larger and more remotely than what they might deal with within a club. And that could be something that is very beneficial to them and very important to them outside of Toastmasters and in their real life. I've said 1,000 times, nobody joins Toastmasters to be a better Toastmaster. We all join it to do something better out in the real world. If we can present ourselves and present the opportunities to area directors to learn how to lead and to practice those skills that they need to be able to take back to their professional careers or their lives, we've given them a great service to be able to help them grow with that. So Rick, I applaud you. I think that's absolutely correct as being a role model. I think there's one other thing we didn't touch on though. It's something that we sometimes just take for granted. Oftentimes when we appoint our area directors, they come from clubs that are probably decent clubs. Some of them usually don't get area directors to come from that club that is a train wreck every single year. That oftentimes doesn't happen. But you get generally area directors that come from better clubs. So sometimes their experience is that of just having one really good club. And our job as division directors is often to help expand their knowledge to what it's like to live in a club that's different than their own. It might be a club that's larger than theirs or smaller than theirs. It could be a club that is that functions better. It could be one that functions worse. But to change that perspective that they have of how Toastmasters works can sometimes be the most eye-opening experience that somebody has. From a personal standpoint, the first time I was an assistant area director, I was also club president of Winter Park Toastmasters. We had 84 members.
Oof.
We had 45 to 50 people at every single meeting, every single Friday morning. That is a completely different experience from a club that has 12 members. Completely different experience. It was eye-opening. It was so enlightening to be able to see how other clubs operate from a standpoint I had never experienced before. So sometimes we don't realize what we don't know, and we don't realize what others don't know. And to position yourself as a division director to help put somebody into a position where they can learn how a different part works. Big clubs are so different than small clubs. And remote clubs in rural areas are so much different than clubs within cities. And to help them grow that. So thoughts on that? What do you think? You think that's valuable or no? I see head nods from.
Surprised that they let a club that big, because I think you lose some of the real spirit of Toastmasters when you get much over about 30 members, because you have so much most of the clubs, if about the bigger clubs I know have like say 25 to 30, and they're still able to have that personal interaction that you so love about Toastmasters, and you get to know the people and get to know them well. When you get a club that big, I would think that they would not get to know everybody quite as well, and of course the trying to speak or whatever would be just a nightmare. You have to schedule, before you ever join.
Well, here's the interesting thing. A club, you would think that would be challenges for a club of that size, but they weren't, because Winter Park was the de facto National Speakers Association for Orlando. There wasn't an actual NSA in Orlando. The closest one was Tampa, which is about 2 hours away. All the professional speakers came together in Winter Park. None of them wanted to speak there. They wanted to mentor people there. They wanted to help folks that are just trying to find their voice learn all the things that they've learned over 30 or 40 years of being on stage, and to help them grow. We had more mentors than we had people that could take mentors. It was the complete opposite. And because they had all been there, the longest term member when I first started there was 47 years. There were a number of folks that had joined in the early 80s, probably half a dozen to a dozen that had been there since the early to mid 80s. And they knew and they all knew everybody. They came every single week. So you would think that it was stretched out and that it wouldn't be a great experience. It was the best NSA experience I could have had without being in the NSA, National Speakers Association, not the ones that spy on your phone calls, not those guys. different NSA. But it was a very different experience because of that. And when you go to a small club, sometimes you have just all members who are just trying to get over their fear of standing up in front of others, and you don't have professional speakers. So being able to provide that sort of enriching environment to an opportunity to area directors, I think is really important with the whole process. So if you look at the breakdown of what Toastmasters looks to try to have area directors, again, assistant division director, program quality, assistant division director, club growth. I would be just tickle pink if every division director had an assistant. I think that would be a fantastic thing, just to have somebody walking with you to help get you through all the processes. And again, with online contests this year and it being very much uncharted territory, having somebody with you, I think would be incredibly beneficial for the whole process, both from a quality and a quantity of help that you can get out there. So I think we talked about the assistance a lot. Rick, it looks like you're either breathing hard or have something to say. It could go either way.
I was going to say, I have two so far,
Oh,
and
nice.
one open slot because I'm deferring that until the end of the first half of the year. But I have what you would call a club growth director, club extension, as I called it.
Yep.
I have a logistics person who is going to be responsible for helping with the logistics at all the contests and things like that. And the other one that I'm saving for the spring when we reach contest season will be a director for, what do you call it, public relations, to try to get more online attendance to all these clubs. And to tell you the truth, without those three directors, or the two that I have right now, I couldn't do the job.
Absolutely. Your logistics manager, are they going to be able to help you with the Zoom portion? Will they be able to transition into kind of a Zoom master?
I call it a Zoom master, but it'll be more than just Zoom. There'll be physical equipment setup that's necessary. And then also, or perhaps there will be, and then also other technologies aside from Zoom might be things that will help clubs.
Absolutely. I'm kind of using Zoom ubiquitously, kind of like Kleenex instead of facial tissue. Zooming's become a verb. It's become its own thing these days. So yes, I completely agree. But remember, we're going to have all of our contests. Everything's going to be online this year. So spring conference is online this year. Fall Education Day is online. Fall Education Week is online this year. All the contests are online this year. Clubs can have in-person contests if they're meeting. They can do that. But area and up have to be online contests this year.
Yeah, but what I meant was that there is a different presentation that may be taking place if someone is hooking into Zoom from a filmed stand-up rather than from the back of a computer. It's a different kind of thing. And so if we can get those people to be doing more like what they would be doing at what they have to do for the regionals, then the more we can come close to that, the better off for all the participants.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that, without a doubt. It's all about the experience for the members in the end, without a doubt. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I think we're good with covering kind of how to build our teams, like why it's important to have extra help, what area directors do, how division directors help. Although, if you think we're good with all this so far, thumbs up if you think we're ready to move on. Yeah? Rick?
Thumbs up of what?
We're ready to move on.
Oh.
Okay. All right. One of the things that Toastmasters talks about then is kind of having agreements out there and having team agreements. I am not a very formal individual. I never have been. My lack of formality, I know, is a challenge for some folks, and I fully own that. So I don't necessarily do what anything that you would call team agreements. I absolutely believe in relationships. I try to set boundaries, but not necessarily formal team agreements. I haven't always fit really well within the corporate world because of my lack of formality. Structure, yes. Formality, not so much. But a lot of folks do like this. And Rick, I've heard great things about some of the principles that you put in when you were doing your team agreements. Could you talk for a couple minutes about how you put that together and what that looks like for those folks like me that aren't necessarily that formal and do these? You're muted.
mute. Let me just bring up my sheet to remind myself of what I'm doing. So if we look at, well, it's just the same thing that's in the division plan. So we went to the division success plan. And so, for example, values, went through the straight values, integrity, for example. When we agree to do something, carry it through, even if we have to raise our hand for help. It's an example. Respect. We always develop clubs and people to work with in evaluation mode. Find a way to avoid negative messages. In all things, encourage confidence and competence. Deliver only positive and encouraging messages in public. On those rare occasions that we have to deliver a negative message, deliver it in private. I'll just go through, service. Our purpose is to assist others in their success, leveraging our apparent and actual positions to make better Toastmasters, better clubs, better areas, and better divisions. And then lastly, excellence. When making decisions, seek diversity of thought. Decisions made with diverse opinions are always of a better quality. Do everything we undertake to the best of our ability, seek help when needed, with the idea that the helper may be the next person to fulfill your position. And so those are just the first 4 principles that are at the beginning of that division success plan. Everything else is derivative of that. Later on, it goes into how you operate in conflict situations, but it comes back to the respect and integrity values at the beginning.
I absolutely love that. And I really love that line about diversity of thought. I think one thing that we have learned over the past 6 months of being locked into our little rooms and just interacting with people online is that it's incredibly easy to find echo chambers that just echo the same thing that you think, so that you think that you are the most brilliant person alive because everyone around you thinks the exact same way, when there is a whole slew of folks out there that have things to be able to add to your thought process that you would have never even thought about. I love the diversity of thought. I have talked about that for years, and I absolutely love that you have that same language.
Well, if you look at the what's called the official Toastmaster International's Facebook group, you get ideas and questions about various topics with responses from all over the world. And hardly a day goes by when I look at that and we say, well, look, that's interesting. I never thought about it from that perspective. And, the whole culture that someone's speaking from drives a difference of outlook and leads to ideas you never would have had yourself.
Yes. Everyone talks from a position of their own space, place, and time. Their own space of where they live, the place of where they come from, and their culture, and the time in which they live. So different generations in different parts of the world certainly look at the world very differently from each other. Folks in different locales throughout the world very much look at the world differently from each other. And even within specific locations, where people come from in place, like me coming from multiple districts, Rick coming from multiple districts, me having moved 42 times in my life, it's like a completely different perspective of the world from somebody who may have lived in the same town for their entire life. And the more that we can include that space, place, and time concept into relationships, the more fulfilling they all are. And I think that's incredibly beneficial. And I think it's important for Toastmasters leaders to talk about more openly of surrounding yourself with diverse opinions, not just those echo chambers. So Rick, I applaud you. Thank you very much for that. That is fantastic. I love that you actually do that. That is really good. So the next part that they talk about is motivation. And they only really talk about 5 parts of motivation, but I'm going to get into something that Toastmasters doesn't really talk about. So that when they talk about motivation, they want to understand it. They want to focus on the value, expectations, recognizing your team, leading by example. There are 2 parts to motivation that I think are exceptionally important that I've never heard Toastmasters International talk about. And that is the difference between extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation are those things that we give to somebody. They are push factors. Somebody wins a contest. What do they get? They get a plastic trophy that we are giving them to say, congratulations on this. We are rewarding them with something specific. In a work environment, we talk about money. How can you buy talent? How can you pay more? If you pay more, do they do more? Those are extrinsic types of motivational applications. If you're looking at bonuses, vacation days, all the perks that go along with the job, everything we give to somebody comes externally, and those are extrinsic motivations. Here's the problem though. When you rely on extrinsic motivators, at some point they become expected. You give the same bonus every year, somebody expects that bonus and is counting it into their annual income. When that happens, it loses its value. All of a sudden, it just becomes part of the way it works. It's no longer a motivation, it's an expectation. And they're different. There is a law of diminishing returns that the more that you give to somebody, you have to step your game up, because what you've given them today becomes expected tomorrow, and in order to motivate them extrinsically tomorrow, you have to give them something else. It's a stepped tier process. The difference between extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation is a pull method, that you're drawing something out from somebody. Just because you're giving somebody a little bit extra money, you're giving somebody a better title, you're giving somebody a trophy at the end of a contest, that doesn't help them enter that contest first. It doesn't help them want to be a district leader first. It doesn't mean that they're going to invest the best of what they have in helping somebody else grow. Intrinsically, most district leaders, area directors, division directors, a lot of club presidents and club officers intrinsically want to invest the best that they have to help somebody else grow. There is something within them that they are getting a personal reward for helping somebody else grow. For me, my greatest intrinsic motivator, the thing that it motivates me more than anything else, is to watch somebody take the next step to level up, to say they were here, whatever I've done to help them, they've now learned something and they've gone to the next step. I love being part of someone's journey and seeing them grow as an individual, as a professional, as whatever they are, to helping them do something in the future that they couldn't have done yesterday. So their tomorrow is brighter than their yesterday. That to me is an incredibly powerful intrinsic motivator. But everybody's different. All of us on this call have different things that intrinsically motivate us. It's why we're unique individuals. It might be that journey that somebody's on. It might be your personal growth. It might be to right a wrong that you've seen out there in the world. There are 1,000 different types of intrinsic motivators. If you can find the intrinsic motivators for each of your area directors, and your area directors can identify them for their club presidents and VPEs and all the club officers, you can provide a unique experience for each person. And Rick talked about this at the beginning, that what you need to provide as an area director to a club is going to vary between clubs. The same holds true to what you're going to provide to a specific individual is going to vary between individuals. How I'm going to work on motivating and helping Mark get the best out of his people is going to be very different from what I have to do with Rick and what I have to do with Laura and for Hannah and Jean and Angela and everybody else I work with, because we're all different people and we all need something different. When you can figure out the intrinsic motivators, they replenish themselves. When you focus on extrinsic motivation, they require you to replenish them to somebody else. So it's great that Toastmasters talks about the value and the expectations and such, and that's all without a doubt a part of how you utilize intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. But if you can focus on finding those things, those strengths, those needs that people have intrinsically to get better, you'll help draw out the best of what they have much more frequently than you will if you're relying on external or extrinsic motivator. That's my take on motivation. Thoughts?
Scott, can you hear me?
Yeah, Shilpa, how are you? We lost you.
Hi.
You're back.
So I was just going to add that for a nonprofit, it's really hard to do the extrinsic motivation anyway, because we're not giving bonuses or increasing salary or a promotion or anything like that. So intrinsic motivation becomes even more important in our case for Toastmasters.
Absolutely. Area directors make just as much money here as what club presidents and district directors do. We all make absolutely nada. But we do it because there's some reason why we are drawn to do these things. So yes, 100%. If we're trying to rely on extrinsic motivators, it's going to be a long year, a really long year. What else? Do you agree with this, with the thought of intrinsic versus extrinsic as a whole?
Yeah,
Yeah.
hey Scott.
Hey, how are you, Sarah?
Hey, I'm good. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard at least that. I mean, I'm sure I've heard that concept before, but I've never heard it teased out like that. So I think that's really cool and a really good point that if you just give people things, you're just going to need to give more and more and more. But if you can tap in to what they believe, then they feel seen and then they're moving off their own energy, not something that you're providing. So I just love that concept. So thank you for sharing it.
Feel free to steal it and use it wherever you want, without a doubt. I think it's so important that that's an important part to share with presidents, with area directors, with clubs, with anybody.
Scott, I just wanted to add, because I just went through with one of my mentee at my work, and this person is a highly talented individual, but lo and behold, she gets, exceptional, and she always wants the bonus to add. Because of last year she didn't get something, she was so sad, and I had to sit down with her. I said, what does it really mean to you, this tiny bonus that you get after tax? What does it do for you? Maybe you go to a bar, sip something, or maybe you go and spend it on bag or lipstick or something else. But what does it really do for you? But the whining gets wine. So I had to really sit down with her and say, let's think what you can do for yourself to come out of that, bonus piece or that extrinsic motivator, because you'll be sad for the rest of your life. When I elaborated that way, I think she understood. And I would say within 1 year, I have seen significant change in her. And I feel like that is the greatest gift for me, that I was able to inspire someone.
Very nice. I think Sarah said something very, very poignant that talked about the same thing. Sometimes people need to be heard. They need to be valued. They need to be seen. If you're somebody who's passed over for bonuses on a regular basis, or even just on one bonus, it might not be the money that's so important, but the fact that they felt invisible, that their value wasn't felt, that they didn't feel as though they mattered. And the bonus is just the physical manifestation of that feeling of not being valued and not being important. The more that we allow people, and the more that we include people to be seen and be heard, and to be recognized for who they are and what they do, you can find those intrinsic things that you don't need the extrinsic things, but sometimes the extrinsic things are motivations of something that's missing that we've done that we didn't necessarily mean to do. So very well said, Farhaneth. I'm so glad you had that experience. And Sarah, that was very well said. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so the last part of this, Rick talked about this really well. So we're not going to go into this, but he actually talked about each one of these points, basically. When you have conflict with somebody, there is an old theory that I think is still exceptionally powerful today. Agree in public, coach in private. If you have something that you need to help correct somebody on, pick up the phone and have a conversation. Get on a Zoom call and talk to somebody face to face. Don't do it in a public forum during a meeting. Don't do it when there's other people around so that you can embarrass them. Allow them to be seen and heard, and listen to them. When you have those conversations, own them as well. Phrase your opening conversations with, I feel. Because you're talking about a conflict that in some way has hurt you. So I feel when you did this. And if you put it in terms of the I feel, the I in a verb, then it takes away the, well, they said, you know, those magical they and thems that exist in organizations that they get pointed to for being the root of all evil, but nobody can find who they and them are. Well, they said you were doing this thing. Well, they're upset with, no, they're not, you are. If you own it, you help build the relationship, and you build a stronger relationship with someone because you're investing in that one-on-one communication, and it's really helpful. Stay as unemotional as possible. It's not possible to stay completely unemotional because it's a feeling, and feelings matter and they're real. But phrase it in that I feel, and it will help you with immensely within that. That is the Toastmasters training. That is everything Toastmasters asked us to talk about. We talked about the one thing, I'm sorry, we missed one thing. District councils, so area councils and division councils. Part of the bringing people together is to have council meetings. And I was surprised the first one of these calls when I talked about council meetings, and everyone, the number one question was, what's a council meeting? Has anybody heard or anybody done area or division council meetings? Rick, you're not allowed to chip in on this one because I have a feeling that our experiences are a little bit different. So for those in Indiana, have you done area council meetings, division council meetings?
I'll jump in.
Mark,
Not,
yes.
we've never called them that, but we're doing that essentially on a regular basis with the area directors and I. And
Cool. Okay. So talk a little bit, so explain what that looks like then, regardless of if you call it the same thing or not. What does that look like?
well, when we do it, it's to discuss as many specific issues as we have, but generally one that is pressing down on us. Last year, as an example, when we had the contests to be held, and frankly, many of us were not comfortable with the idea of running an area or a division contest. We got together and we figured out how we were going to work. Essentially, we were a working committee. This year, we're working on online contests, and we're doing the same thing. We're going to get together, unfortunately, not all at the same time because of scheduling issues, and figure out how we can get some experience at this before we have to have the experience. In other words, we're going to make our first set of mistakes in private. We'll make our second set of mistakes in public.
It kind of sounds like the whole Toastmasters promise, right? Fail in private so you can succeed in public. Fantastic. Rick, is that kind of your experience as well with area councils, division councils? Very similar or no?
Well, area councils, when I became area director here in Kentucky, were unknown to my area at all. It never happened before. And so for when I was an area director, they were not problem solving, they were introductory. And so what I would do at those is I had them after the contests when people were more likely to be there anyway. And then we just went through the status of each club versus insofar as the DCP was concerned. Now, as division director, we had we're doing all of our meetings, of course, online. We had our first council in July, which is just getting off the ground, setting up the division plan, things like that. And then we've had about every other month after that. Well, that makes it only one other month, but we've had 2 so far this year, mainly in now trying to move over to problem solving, not so specific as Mark has, although I think that's a good idea to use maybe a little later for us. But our first triage, so to speak, is how do we help certain clubs that were in trouble at the end of the year?
Nice.
And so if we can do that using help from others that aren't necessarily that area director, then we're going to deploy those situations. And then also encouraging the clubs that we're going to start to do so, even though we can't meet in person yet. And that's 2 things we're really working on division councils right now.
Very nice. I will say this about area councils, division councils. There are some specific guidelines that are supposed to be out there about who's on them and how often they meet and all those sorts of things. I am not concerned about that whatsoever. If you can start to pull together area directors, and you can start to pull together club presidents and VPEs and club officers to talk about what's happening within your areas and within your divisions, and you start pulling out those ideas, that diversity of thought, this diversity of ideas for how we solve problems, how we recognize the problems that are there and what we do with those going forward. That's the most important part. I am completely unconcerned about how many or how often. My stronger concern is being able to pull folks together and have open conversations so that folks feel heard. There's diversity of thoughts, and there's a movement of where we are now compared to where we're trying to go for the future. So if you haven't started doing those yet, if you haven't ever thought of that, I strongly encourage, start to pull together the folks that you work with in your own areas, in your own divisions, and start to share some ideas. You might just find that the best idea to solve something exists within somebody else that they've been doing for a long time and you had never even thought of it. So that is the concept of the area council and the division council. So I have two questions to end with this on. The first one is, I guess, somewhat self-serving. Do you think these kind of trainings are beneficial? Is this something that you like doing? Are you finding value in this? My plan was to keep doing this for the year, but if all of you are like, no, this is dumb, I completely hear you. So what do you think? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Won't hurt my feelings either way.
Okay, I personally hate these,
Okay.
but I also know you can't get together as a group. And if I could get together as a group, I far rather have somebody in front of me screaming at me that I could actually physically hold and strangle because they did something I didn't like. But I also know that it is one of those necessities at the moment. And I think that they are useful, and you can go and refer like the different club presidents or different people to some of the different trainings and say, hey, this is one that might be able to help you with that issue. There was several things discussed that were cover that particular area. So in that respect, it's nice to have them. Even if we do get back to the point where we're able to meet in person, it would still be nice to have recordings of the training sessions to have them available for people to refer to. So, but like I say, my first choice naturally is for all of us to get together and have a COVID party, you know.
I'm having a COVID party, but I'm completely into getting back together in person. I completely agree with that. But with that not being an option, is this a format that works for people?
I think it makes it pretty easy for
Laura.
most people to be able to access it, and they can do so at their own time. So I think that part of it is really good. But as I say, I far rather would have everybody get together in one spot, and we can go and put our heads together and do the networking, which you're not able to do the networking under this kind of example or training, but it still is a good way to go and find out about different things. And where we have some people from some different areas here, you are going to get a little bit of a different perspective that you would with with a face-to-face training.
Fantastic, thank you. I saw Rick with the thumbs up, so I think that's an affirmative from Rick. From this, Mark, Sarah, Farhana, what y'all think? Yes, no?
I'll jump in.
I want to say something as well, Scott.
Sure.
So we could also do this self-paced in case we miss a meeting where you can gather all this information at your own time. Sometimes for busy individuals, it's hard to attend a lot of meetings in the evening. So just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yes, and that'll get into the second question I have for everybody. So hold that thought. Mark, you were going to say something as well?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to be a little contrary to some others that I've heard. I've heard some good stuff tonight. I'll certainly agree to that right away, and I'm glad I heard that. I've also heard that we've spent an hour doing this, and I don't think I've gotten an hour's worth of information out of it. I sort of weigh every minute that I spend on a Zoom meeting, whether or not it was valuable or enjoyable. I don't know the solution, but as far as being happy to attend another one of these, if it's mandatory, you'll probably see me here. But I sure hope we get a little bit more per minute than we had tonight. Sorry, those are my 2 cents.
What was missing tonight? What did you not think you got the value for tonight?
You know, to avoid getting acrimonious, this
Okay.
being in public, I'd rather not talk about it.
Okay, so give me a call later. Okay. All right, so point number 2 then, it kind of goes to this. The number 1 email question that I get, and I get it probably 3 or 4 times a day from a club. Where do I find the recordings? I can't find the recordings. I have probably answered 100 of those in the last 2 months from clubs, from officers. If you could please all reach out to your club presidents, your VPEs, your club officers out there, and help them find where these are posted on the through the district website to access the YouTube channel that way. That would be most beneficial, because I think there is something to being able to access this at your own leisure, at the time that works best for you. But a lot of folks can't find them. They just don't know where they are. So if you could help with that, that would be very beneficial, I think, to everybody involved, if possible. Having said that, are there any last questions tonight that we can answer for you? No? Okay. I'm going to stop recording. Stop sharing my screen. I'm going to hit stop recording. I thank you one and all for being here tonight.